Listening to music can be both a very private and a very public experience. If you look around, you'll often see people sitting on a bus or a train or walking around wearing earbuds or headphones, creating for themselves a personal space for listening to music, often in a public place. At the same time, large-scale stadium tours where tens of thousands of people gather together at once to listen to a single artist have never been so popular. This demonstrates the continuing attraction and significance that people attach to listening to music as a communal experience. I'm Sean Williams, Senior Lecturer in Music at the Open University. In this video, I'd like to explore some of the ways in which people listen to music together with some personal listening history. When we think of amplified music, we might think of a home hi-fi or a sound system, large stacks of loudspeakers at a festival, a street corner in a carnival, or in a club or a concert venue. The early history of sound systems is fascinating and in part owes a great debt to some of the listening practices that developed in the Caribbean in the period immediately after the Second World War. The Jamaican music scene, for example, was not only the origin of a number of global music genres, including ska, reggae, and dub, but it also forged some really interesting entrepreneurial practices around the production of records, mixing and remixing, record pressing and distribution, and most importantly of all, the sound system. After arriving in the UK from the Caribbean in the 1950s and 60s, many young people, not finding a similar access to listening to and dancing to good music open to them, were quick to replicate the social listening conditions they were already familiar with and set up small dances that in many towns and cities all over the UK became more and more popular and acted as a focus for bringing people together. I met up with Clive Spring, who moved from St Vincent to the UK aged 10 years old in the 1960s to hear more about his own experiences. And how did you listen to music back then? Were there different ways? Would you listen at home or with friends or, you know?
Well, it was mainly with friends or a group of people because when I was a boy, not many people could afford to have a stereo. And we had these things like what we call they're called radiograms, big old things, you know, and they've got the speakers in. So that's how we listened if you was indoors and your parents were affluent enough to have a stereo. But normally, the most people in my village, where I come from, they used to put a big speaker out under a tree, yeah, and then they play the music and there'll be a sound man. And then if you had a particular music that you wanted to hear, you can bring it along, not allowed to touch his turntable, and then he'll play it for you. But that's how we listened to it as a group. Very rare that we had music, we could afford to sit down like nowadays and listen to music on your own and stuff like that. Headphones, if they were invented, I never had them. What we found was listening to music on our own, if we had a chance, is good, but it didn't reverberate the same as when you listen to it as a group and then you talked about it afterwards. Like I said, we were saying that we had a particular ritual that we used to do every Friday or so evening. What we'll do when we finish work and that in the evening, we'll get together, we'll bring along with what is someone's house, what the friend could be my house this week, my next friend next week. And what we'll do, we'll bring around our latest album or something. And then we'll take it in turns and we'll put that album on. Before that album started, you made sure you build your spliff, you had your drink, you did whatever you had to, have your beverages, whatever you need to do, whatever was your thing. No one was allowed to talk. It was a ritual. You listen to that album all the way through, then afterwards we'll discuss it. There'll be debates, there'll be disagreement, there'll be agreement and all that. But we learned from that. And that was a very spiritual thing actually, because you might have 6 or 8 people in the room, no one talking, just penetrating that music, you know? And at the end, we'll congratulate each other for the album. Obviously, someone messed up and brought an album we had to listen all the way through that we didn't like. Didn't go down too well, but it was a really educational period. It made you, I think what it done, as I'm an older man now, those people that listened to that music with me, I can still remember them today. And I can still remember that conversation. I think it brings a deep unity. Sounds absurd, but it brings a deep closeness that I didn't have with other friends that I didn't listen to. music with. We had a different affinity. It's hard to put into words, but there was something special about that. My friend Wayne, I remember, and in one of those sessions, he brought in an album, and that completely changed all our lives, you know. And up until that time, we was hearing music for sure, lyrical music, and that at that time, if I remember rightly, in the genre of lyrical music, I would say probably give it to Bob Dylan. You know, that was, he was the, yeah. But then he brought this album called Natty Dread by Bob Marley. Everyone was just blown away. It was just a revelation. We've never heard lyrics like that deep, that, you know. So much so that it ended up getting us thrown out of a dance, because he took it to this dance and he demanded it be played, you know, and stood up on the speaker box. They played 2 tracks. He still wanted more, but the crowd wanted more as well, you know, and this guy didn't have it in his collection. So yeah, we got thrown out for being, you know, too determined to get it played. So yeah.
Did you have a favourite system?
Oh, I just sound like Quaker City. Well, he was that bass. There's a sound called Quaker City, and make sure you don't eat too much or stand next to that speaker before you go there, because you're gonna be sick and thrown up. We should warn people, don't, you know, because every man loves to stand up, lean up on the speaker and you know, that's what Quaker City would just mash you down. The bass was horrendous. It was just, that's what they call Quaker City, you know, like earthquake coming down, you know what I mean? And then there are loads of other sounds. I could go on and on. Soprano B, that's, if you want to get a nice girl, you go to soprano B, because that's where the pretty girls go, to that sort of sound. You know, you always have a slickers, you know what I mean?
It sounds like there's potentially a bit of a contrast then between the sort of more spiritual side of things and the more social, and more of a, is it a sort of a continuum, would you say?
That's a very good question, actually. There was this, so you had sound systems that were regarded as serious and cultural, and you had those that regarded as commercial, yeah, just for the general public. So Soprano B was a sound system that everyone who went there, you can say it's like mods and skinheads for the opposite side. So most people that went there were more into clothes and fashion and portraying this slick image, you know, and stuff like that. And consequently, had a lot of girls going to that sort of thing. I never played middle of the road music. There was no serious cultural music there, you know, to trigger up those sort of emotion, you know, which is good. It was creating love, can't knock that. But then you had that, it sounded like I was saying, like Quaker City and Shaka. There weren't nothing about that. There was strictly culture, you know, like Soprano B. If you went there, you'd probably end up rubbing the wallpaper off the wall, dancing with a woman, you know. I think none of that happened in Shaka, you know. People weren't interested in, not to say they weren't interested in women, but not at that time. So yeah, definitely there was a more social loving and thing. We still had love there, but not cultural, not in that spirit. And these Shaka and other sound, you know, they had that cultural thing. Awakening, trying to awaken the youths, you know, in a cultural way, yeah.
Is it something to do with value, potentially, in that it was hard to find those records? They were scarce. You were waiting for them. You might have a connection, and you knew that somebody had talked about this record, and it was hard to get. You couldn't just turn on the internet and get it immediately. Do you think there's something in that?
That's a good question again. Well, I used to travel all the way to London to Daddy Cool down Brixton to get my selection, yeah, and we'd be fighting, we'd be in the reggae, yeah? And then what he'll do, he might only have X amount of one record, and I'll have that, and man fighting because for the last one, and man, our boxing man, that was mine, you passed that to me and he took it, like, you know, it was that religious, you know what I mean, yeah, he's had the last copy, yeah, so yeah, we had to go, you had to, the music that you heard, like on a weekend, I'm gonna go to my friend with excitement. I thought, what selection he's got, where he's got them. He won't tell me where he's got it from as well. Yeah, he might have a special source, you know what I mean? And so, so yeah, it was critical because it wasn't easy accessible. Not like today, you can go on the internet and type in anything and get music. And then, no, you had to do your research. You had to do, you had to know what you was getting in, So it was vital, and people appreciate it more, and they treasure it more. And if you dare at someone's house and you got a trembling hand, and you gonna put on their record and make like one little scratch, oh, you're in for it. Do you know what I mean? Because you could dare not scratch that vinyl. Yeah, so that's a very good point actually. It was highly valued. I think more so than it is today. And I was listening to music from the 60s, 70s, my best year, 80s and 90s. Obviously, it was a good. So yeah, so I've been listening to reggae music and music in general a long time. So yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to the youths.
What especially struck me about my conversation with Clive was the sense of identity that he attached to listening to music with different groups, listening with friends, following a particular sound system, but also how travelling across the UK led him to encounter different groups of people, all united by a common love of amplified music and sound systems. Of course, there are many other ways in which people have come together and listened to music, and these have changed over time. In my experience, it's very rare to see a band playing in a bandstand, and yet these architectural oddities remain as evidence of listening practice from a bygone era. Fairgrounds have been surprisingly important as sites for young people to come together and listen to popular music at loud volumes. The role of the fairground barker, using a microphone to drum up business and attract customers onto a ride, is actually quite similar to that of the Jamaican DJ, using the microphone to enhance and comment on records and draw people into a listening experience. At the other end of the scale, we can see huge crowds assembled in sports stadiums to see a single artist such as U2 on their 1993 Zoo TV tour, or more recently, Taylor Swift's 2024 Eras tour, which was the highest grossing tour of all time, raking in over $2 billion at the box office and selling over 20 million tickets. Whilst music styles, and especially the technologies related to the production of music and the performance of music, have changed considerably over the years, one thing that remains constant is people's desire to get together in large groups and listen to often loud music as a shared communal experience. If you'd like to delve deeper into any of the ideas that we've been discussing, come and visit us at the Open University Music website to find out more ways in which you can study music.
If you enjoyed this clip, feel free to follow the links on screen for more interesting articles and free courses from the Open University.